Welcome to Small Talk, where each week we sit down to discuss the sermon-based small group questions at Wallula Christian Church.
Welcome back to Small Talk, Wallula's weekly podcast. Joining us today are Craig, our worship pastor, Lance, our lead pastor. My name is Zach. I am the student pastor here at Wallula. We are so glad you guys are joining us today. We are looking at Revelation chapter 12, the woman, the dragon, her offspring, a lot of good stuff here. Before we dive into that, we're going to, like always, start off with kind of a fun question. And the question goes like this. What record in the Guinness Book of World Records would you most likely achieve if you have not done it yet already? I doubt you have done anything like that already. But if you haven't done it already, what do you think you could achieve?
Right.
Oh, we didn't. I'll go first.
Yeah, usually you say.
I normally
I'm kind of looking around.
Craig? Yeah, no,
I don't have any world records.
I know. I was like, I have not yet done anything.
The thing about it too is anything goes.
Yeah,
right.
It is
Because I looked up.
Right.
I said I didn't do any looking into
low.
this. I looked up one thing because I was like, I don't know what I would try to do. And then I thought, well, I really like ice cream. Let's look up world records involving ice cream.
Sure enough.
Right.
The stuff that you can find. So like one of them was most scoops of ice cream on a cone.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just
weird.
this amount of ice cream.
All right.
One of them was like the tallest ice cream cone, but then there was also the tallest ice cream cone made of people. They I don't know, stacked themselves up and wore coordinated clothing and made an ice cream cone. I don't know.
Some of that, I guess, you don't even have to like really perform. You just have to like do.
Yeah.
Like, just,
And I thought the strangest one
people.
was longest chain of people licking ice cream.
Weird. How many? Do you remember how many it was?
I don't know. In the hundreds, like upper hundreds.
Oh, if we do like a Sunday morning thing, maybe
Yeah.
we can knock it.
There's one guy ate 103 grams of ice cream in a minute.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm like, well, I'm gonna go for 2 minutes then.
I don't know what
103 grams.
what does that
Yeah.
even equal?
I don't know.
Grams to pounds.
I'm like, put this in like pints. Let's think Ben and Jerry's. Here.
Right.
yeah. All right.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah.
don't
Okay.
know.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem like a lot to me.
It doesn't. Yeah. So I thought, well,
But I
I'll
don't know
try
what
that.
130 grams is.
I
So
know.
I don't know. And it's only 1 minute.
And
In a minute?
I'll say, well, I'm gonna break it. I'm gonna do a 2-minute record, and then I'll have my own
Less
record.
than 2 minutes.
Right.
Yeah. If it hasn't, especially if it hasn't been done at all, then you have the record.
Exactly.
Yeah. How do you get people involved in like the longest chain of
That's what I was
people
wondering,
licking
too.
ice cream? You know, what
Yeah.
does that invite? What does that text message look like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have an
Will
idea.
Will you,
I have an idea.
will you come stand in line and lick ice cream with
Yeah.
me, please?
That's true.
That seems weird. Like,
Yeah. If you have like a school event and you give everyone ice cream, be like, hold, everyone just wait
Right.
for a
Right.
second. They don't have to know. Just
Right.
be like, can
Yeah.
you guys just wait for 1 second? And on go, can you just do this?
Maybe so.
But it costs
Yeah.
like a lot of money, like, because you have to get the
For
representative.
the ice
from-
cream?
Well, that too.
Oh, well, that would.
No,
cost.
but to set a record, you have to get
Yeah.
the Guinness person there, and it's
Yeah.
like $5,000 or something for
Whoa.
them to be
Oh,
there.
really?
It's something.
I didn't
for
know
them
that.
for them to be there to record.
You can't
be there.
send in video proof.
No,
or
it has.
something?
They have to be there in person. So a lot of
Yeah.
times you'll see it's like a blue jacket with them and a clipboard, and they're
It's gotta be
timing or
official,
whatever. Yeah,
'cause we're
I've seen a lot of
checking
Dude
these
Perfect.
things.
They have it on.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They do it a lot there.
Right.
I was thinking about it. I'm kicking myself because I was like, I'm gonna do some research on this and find the dumbest, simplest thing.
Right.
And totally forgot. But one that I think just off the top of my head that I'm like, maybe I could try that, but is like biggest bubble blown just for bubble gum. I'm like, you get enough tries, you can. I don't know. Maybe I'm optimistic, but I'm like, I can blow a bubble. I can, just keep trying. And so I'm sure once you do it enough, it's one of those things you don't really try to do well. You just do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I bet if you really tried and like figured out the perfect ratio of what kind of bubble gum you can. And I think a lot of these things, it's just, no one's really tried. It's like some,
Yeah.
if you ever
You
see
could
the
just-
people who break them, it's just
Yeah.
like a random person who looks
Right.
like no skill, but they've actually put in the work. And then, so I'm
Like the people that gathered together and said,
That's
let's
right.
make an ice cream cone
that's
of
right.
people.
Like, done.
right.
Okay.
Yeah. That does not sound like a world record.
No. Uh-uh.
I mean, like,
Because people aren't doing that.
Right.
Most ice cream eaten by someone named Craig.
Right. I feel like you could have
talking
one
about.
person. I'm an ice cream cone. You know,
Yeah.
I identify as an ice cream cone, and you have that world record
Right.
because nobody else is doing it.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
What about you, Lance?
I don't have any world records. I think.
I think it's more the first part of that
Right,
question.
Just wanted to get that out.
You
Right.
haven't yet.
Yeah, I haven't yet. And I was thinking, you know, the world records are really dumb, like in the Guinness Book of World Records, because it can just be like for poor hygiene. You can win, you know, have a,
Yeah,
like the
that's
guy, you know, remember the pictures of the guy with the longest fingernails
Oh, yeah.
They're just kind
in
of dangling.
history. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just like trim your fingernails,
Right,
dude. You know, take care of that. Don't let it go. But
I love that stuff as a kid.
He has a world record,
I thought
right.
it was super cool looking.
Right, right. In college, I lived in this apartment for 2 years, and I drink Diet Coke, and so I had these. I just kept all the boxes of the cans of Diet Coke, and we just stacked them up on. I had a lot of those boxes. I don't know how many I had, or if it would be a world record, but I feel like I could be in contention.
Yeah. All you had
Wow.
to do is call them up.
So
Get Guinness there.
Just be a hoarder.
right. It's the same.
All you've
like
done is
poor
not thrown
hygiene.
away your
right.
trash.
Right. For being super lazy.
My roommate
Yeah.
in college did that with pizza boxes.
Oh, that's
those
worse.
Those are greasy.
Well, no,
Yeah.
like frozen pizza.
Okay.
So it wasn't
all
like,
right. Yeah.
but yeah, he just started stacking them in our closet, and then he was gonna make a chair out of them somehow. He wanted a pizza throne.
Uh-huh.
Didn't do it.
Oh, weird.
No,
That could have been a record,
Didn't
though.
happen.
I actually
Yeah.
have some friends from Ozark who did set a world record. That was
Okay.
pretty legit, but they would not recognize it. And it was just for my friends who decided to travel to all 50 states as fast
Mm-hmm.
as you can. And they looked it up. They did all this research. They got a sponsor to sponsor them to pay for the gas.
Right.
And they had a website for it, and this was about 5 years ago. And they traveled to each state, and they're just going through like a corner of the state and then going and it
Right.
zigzags. And they rented a car, and it took 6 days and something. And they did that, and then they ended up in like Oregon, and then they flew to Alaska and then Hawaii. And so the news was there to like, oh yeah, it was all planned out. And the news was there in Hawaii to say, you know, all this stuff. And it showed that the previous record was this, and then they actually beat it. However, Guinness would not recognize it because, even though it's all documented, because it's dangerous. And so they won't do anything that supports like, okay, now who else is going to beat this? You have to drive 80 miles an hour all throughout this, you know. And so that's one of the things that they don't officially recognize because in order to beat it, you have to start maybe breaking some laws to get even faster. But yeah, he said the only hiccup on the trip, I'm sure there's more, but the biggest one was they had to drop the car off in like Oregon before they flew in. They drove into the airport, and then they drove across America, like every state in 7 days. So what should have been, I don't know, whatever normally is mileage, they had so much more. And they're like, here's the keys. And they're like, whoa, 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 what is this? And they're like, we have the unlimited. So they almost didn't make it on the plane because they were being held up at the car dealership because they thought something fishy was going on. They didn't tell them ahead of time, we're about to drive this thing. But anyway, so yeah.
Now you know.
Now I know someone who is kind of famous, almost famous.
But unrecognized.
Unrecognized. And I think since then it's been beaten even then because it's still like you can find the information.
Yeah.
And I think they said someone else has already a few years later. But at the time it's kind of a big deal. All 50 states.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And I'm disappointed in
And Guinness.
yeah. I'm disappointed in that.
Well, it's weird. They're like, we don't do
we
something that
don't-
promotes like could be dangerous, but
Right.
like here's the heaviest person in the world.
Yeah.
Can anyone beat it?
Right.
Like I feel like that's a little dangerous.
Right.
Yeah.
Or like, any of these things. Like
Right.
you eat the most hot dogs in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Right.
That can't be good for
No.
you.
That's not.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
Not beneficial for your health.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think so.
I think have we answered this question now? I think we've been on it for a while.
Well, it's interesting.
We'll just keep going down. We'll just have to change the title on the YouTube video. Revelation 12.
Three pastors talk about Guinness Book of World Records.
It's easier than the fall of Satan.
It is, yeah.
That's true.
Yes. I think our laughter is going to go down a little bit. All right, here
We're
we
just
go.
avoiding.
Yeah. But as we get into Revelation 12, a lot of really big imagery that even if you're not know much about Revelation, you've probably heard of these, the dragon and the woman and all this stuff. And so we're going to try to go through just a couple of these images because that's really what pops out to us in this. And so for the first one, question number 2, we're looking at really this identity of the woman. And just like with everything else in Revelation, it's sort of symbolic. Not even sort of, it's symbolic, but there's a lot of possibilities for the identity of this woman. And so when you read previous passages in the Bible from Genesis 37 and Romans 9 and Galatians 4, we see possible variations for who this woman could be. What are some of the thoughts that you guys have on who this is and maybe pros and cons of what those interpretations are? So you can answer that however you want, if you want to give the different versions of it or just tell what you think it is, or who you think it is. But yeah, I mean, I'll go first if you guys, I know normally I assign it. Who's going first? And so I'll give sort of some basic stuff. And really, I've been going through this with Lance as you've been preaching it. So I'm kind of picking apart a little bit of the research you've already done. So, but yeah, not really having thought much about it up until this past week and really thinking through that, I just always kind of assumed that it was Israel. And it wasn't until you said, oh, there's other interpretations and other ideas, especially with the idea of Eve or Mary, being either the first woman or the one because in chapter 12, we see that that Jesus comes from this woman. And so Mary obviously is someone that you could point to. But the idea that from this woman, we see that I think just a crown of 12 stars. And so the idea of 12, being symbolic all throughout the Bible, but especially with Israel and the 12 tribes. And so the idea that, it's Israel, and that Jesus comes from Israel. So both holds still true. And I think really more than who the woman is specifically, seeing what happens because we know that the baby born is Jesus and that Satan is there. And I think that's sort of the bigger picture that we're trying to pay attention to. So sometimes we can get lost in the weeds of, well, what about this and this? But taking a step back, we see what's going on with the dragon and with Jesus and with humanity. And so that's kind of the simple form I got. I don't know about you guys. I'm kind of stealing some of your ideas already, but that's before I even had really gone into it. I'd already kind of thought that was pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, along the same lines as you. I guess with things in Revelation, like we've talked about, it's hard to nail down one answer and then just say, like, this is it. Just like you mentioned on Sunday, certain faith backgrounds will say it's Mary, and they're pretty certain about that.
Right.
And that's just hard for me to wrap my mind around, that that's the answer. Especially when it starts off with a great sign appeared in heaven. It's a sign. It's a symbol of something. And then I guess to what you said, Zach, is there's a narrative that plays out. And it is symbolic, but what it represents, it can't be really like nailed down as a key character or one figure from Scripture. And so that's kind of I'm reiterating the things that you said, but
right. Kind of the most interesting to me, and there are real Bible scholars who think that John is talking about a specific constellation, that he's pointing to Virgo, I think, and because I'm not into all that stuff, but and they use the position of the sun literally in the midst of the woman, and so then when the stars are here and the sun, and they use that positioning to validate their point there. And it's interesting only because, when you think about Jesus' first coming, and there's this star that the wise men, the Magi follow to find Mary and Joseph and Jesus. in Bethlehem, and certainly in the first century, people were fascinated, and I suppose they still are, but they really did look to the sky for to tell them things and whatnot, and that was true sort of across the board. We have a real kind of apprehension to that, I guess, because we don't, we want to listen to God and His Word and not but I think Jews in the first century probably would have recognized that and made sense of that. I don't think that John is talking about a specific constellation. If he is, like I said on Sunday, I think he's using that as an object lesson for this bigger story. That Greek word for sign is translated in other places in the New Testament as wonder or miracle, and that's really, we're talking about this miracle that God produces in Jesus, in the birth of His Son to a virgin. That's miraculous. That Jesus provides a way for sinners throughout history to be reunited with God. That's miraculous. I mean, we're pointing to this bigger story here. No matter who you come down and say, okay, well, this woman represents so-and-so. I don't think necessarily it's a constellation. There are folks way smarter than me who do. I don't think it's Eve. I think the birth pains there, probably John has in mind, Jesus' description perhaps in Matthew 24, that those would be associated with the end times. I think that's more of the imagery there than you get Eve because of that's part of the curse, right? The pain in childbirth. And Mary, Catholics will use this section of scripture to kind of support their view of Mary as,
So they interpret it as Mary.
Yeah,
in
to
12.
exalt Mary to a certain status, and that's just not found elsewhere in the New Testament, right? That's hard to figure. So I said on Israel too, and some people would say the ideal Israel, so that's believing Israel, that sort of idea, but it's God's people, right? And throughout time, and that He makes a way for Jesus through her. So it's an interesting discussion, but I think that's, we're dealing with the story of this big picture story of Jesus entering the world.
Yeah, I've always been surprised, not always, but when diving into this, how much, because you had given some background verses to look into,
right?
And just looking at that and the references to sun and moon and stars and with
Right.
Joseph's dream, and it's like if you just read Revelation as it is, without any background knowledge, without any context, it's easy to see why there's so many different views. And not to say like, well, we've just nailed it, so this is all the right answers, because we're still working through, but. There's so much allusion to the Old Testament that kind of
Right.
fleshes out one's theology and gives you a bigger picture. And
That John expects you to know.
Right, because his audience
yeah,
would have.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Because he doesn't, in other places in the New Testament, and Jesus would sometimes quote from the Old Testament. You can go back to the Old Testament and find that quotation, and John never does that.
Right.
There's never a straight up quotation. I mean, literally never. In Revelation, there's never a straight up quotation from the Old Testament. It's always just kind of background,
Right. And yet
illusion.
There's so much in it. There's so much Old Testament in it.
Right.
Yeah. So definitely, doing your homework on the Old Testament helps you to understand the New Testament more, for sure. Well, the second one is we're going to kind of combine 6, 7, 8, and 10, but really we're looking at the dragon. We're going to kind of tackle that. I'm not going to read all these questions. I'm going to let you guys kind of whatever thoughts you have, because it was such a big part of the scripture. Obviously, as the woman was giving birth to the child, as we know, as Jesus, the dragon was there, and we were talking about this morning, that I even have some friends who, during their nativity set, they'll put a dragon out, right, off on the side, sort of reminding them of, it wasn't just this sweet little holy thing, but there was a war going on, and Satan was there, and And so we have the battle going on. We have the dragon chasing the woman. We have ultimately the dragon being defeated. And then he turns his wrath and his anger against her offspring. And so we have all this going on in chapter 12. And so the big question is, tell me your thoughts on any of that. But the Satan, after he was defeated, was thrown down. What does that represent or mean? What is and really, how does that affect us now as we're reading something that was written 2,000 years ago? The fact that it was the woman's offspring now that the dragon is going after, that's us. So now we're in this story, like in real time. What does that look like? And how do you think he does that? And also what can we do about that? Any of you guys want to go first on this one?
I guess I can start us off.
Okay.
We'll see what happens here. There's a lot to unpack and figure out and study, but as far as I guess the later half of that question is what happens after Satan is thrown down. His attention is redirected, I guess, to the offspring, to God's people, humanity. One of the books that I was looking at studying this described it as his focus or his limitation was corralled. I kind of like how that. I was like, oh, okay, I get it a little more now, because he's cast out of heaven. So there's nothing like the authority, the power of Jesus ascending, sitting on the throne. That's getting in the way of Satan's rule and what he wants to do. And so the attention is diverted into the offspring. And then you see, like at the end of the chapter, it says he's standing. He stood on the sand of the sea, and we've talked about the sea representing the abyss, evil, chaos coming from that. And then 13 starts off with, I saw a beast rising out of the sea. So there's something happening. And we were talking about it a little bit. And I always, when it comes to this question of kind of like spiritual warfare type stuff and Satan trying to distract and confuse and lie and twist things, I think a lot of Screw Tape Letters, C.S. Lewis, that's his imagination and kind of interpretation of what spiritual warfare could look like. But Zach, you mentioned it at the beginning of the book. I actually haven't read the whole thing. I was like halfway through it, and I was like, I got to take a break because it's a lot to take in, but it is eye opening. But even they talk about someone going to a church service on a Sunday, and if the demons can distract the person, then that's a win for Satan. He talks about like if you're distracted by, I don't know if he mentions like the temperature of the room or like someone behind you singing out of key, or if you just don't put any intention behind what you're doing on a Sunday morning, like that's a win. And so reading that and thinking about that, that's really eye-opening because you think about more so your details of your daily life and kind of what you're doing. And I guess too with you look at Satan in the dragon in this story, but then also the offspring. In verse 10, there's a response to Satan being thrown down. It says, "Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. The accuser of our brothers has been thrown down. He accuses them day and night before our God. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they love not their lives, even unto death." And so we see this picture of people recognizing that the sacrifice of Jesus, what he's done for us on the cross, his resurrection, and now his eternal rule and reign in heaven, we reap the benefits of that. And we simply, like through this, it's like, well, we remain faithful. It's like what we talked about at the beginning of Revelation, like we keep these words and we make Jesus the king of our lives. We follow him And we see through Revelation, the end, the picture is eternity, what we see in the throne room. And so Satan, the dragon's not going to win.
Yeah.
Even when in this moment, in this lifetime, there's ups and downs and we feel the effects of the spiritual warfare, the end result is he's not going to win. So,
yeah. Yeah, when I was trying to put all this together, I think, before I came into this, the big picture is that Satan's going to win, and so we're good. Satan's already been defeated, and I think it's easy to be lulled into a false sense of like, well, it's already been done, but we're still living here, and so Satan is still attacking. And when I was looking at sort of like the big takeaway from it, like his, he redirected these destructive efforts toward us, but the destruction he was trying to destroy the child, and then he redirected his efforts toward the offspring, which is us. And I keep thinking about like, how do we as a society approach Satan? And usually it's in one of two ways. One is overemphasize or underemphasize, but specifically in our culture, I think we more underemphasize to the point where it's like a joke.
Yeah.
Right. There's a show, Lucifer, right? And I've never even seen it, but it's just he wears a suit, and so we have these sort of.
There's a terrible new cartoon coming out that I just read about.
Okay.
And I don't remember the name, but the idea of this cartoon is that there's this little girl who is Antichrist.
Okay.
And she. Anyway, it's along the same lines.
Right.
It's just terrible. It's like this making fun of this theological truth.
Right.
I mean, however you view Antichrist, right? But that it's not that big a deal. So this,
right.
Just anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No,
It was awful.
And I even thinking to myself, like the Far Side comics. There's a whole section where he's heaven or hell, and he's doing comics about God, baking the earth, and he's like, this thing's not done. And then and so just kind of funny stuff. But then the idea that we just underestimate Satan so much, like even in people who think they're going to hell, and they're like, well, I'd rather go to hell than whatever. I'm like, I don't think you understand. Like Satan's goal is to destroy. Right.
Yeah.
His goal is to destroy. And the idea that we're just going to be like, well, when some movies will have, I sold my soul. And it's like, Satan is not interested in like paying you off or whatever. Like he's just going to take it and destroy. And it's way worse than we can imagine. I remember in high school, there was this shirt, people would make these shirts for youth group. It said Satan is a nerd. And I thought that was funny, right? I was like, that's funny. And I remember some leader was sort of calling that out. And he's like, basically it was like, that's exactly what Satan wants you to think. He wants you to laugh at him. He wants you to like lower him so much to where he's like, but like he is so much smarter and wiser and more powerful and more vicious and more cunning than you can even imagine. And the fact that you are just like, Satan's a nerd, you have no idea. And he is totally fine you going to church, kind of like you said in the Screwtape Letters. He's totally fine with you being distracted during your prayers and being like, hey, as long as you didn't really get anything out of that, you can keep doing it. And we think we're winning, or we think when we are totally being manipulated. And a lot of it is because we don't appreciate, I guess that's the right word, Satan. We don't appreciate Satan. I remember in like when I started college at Ozark, there was a book that had come out by Philip Yancey, like the Jesus I Never Knew, and it was really good. It was more of the historical look at Jesus and kind of peeling away all the stuff. And it's almost like, man, I wish he would write like the Satan I Never Knew to show us like, here's really who he is, because we are missing the whole point, and it distracts us so much. And in some places in the world, there's external persecution from the outside world, but a lot of times it's just internal conflict between. So you see little things that we think we struggle with, like gossip or slander or hypocrisy or lies, and all these things are just kind of minor, not a big deal, and it's Satan just picking away at us in our own faith. And even those who are, I'm just humbled by like how many people I know who were confident, like for Jesus, who, like in college, who now want nothing to do with Jesus. And I'm sure Satan's just sitting back thinking, yeah, sure, you say whatever you want. I'm a nerd. It's not a big deal. It's whatever. You're fine at church. And then just give us some time. And then he is just waging a war against us in big and small ways. And I think it's because we don't appreciate really who he is. We're not really scared or, I don't know, intimidated. We don't take it seriously. And so anyway, all that's to say is he was going after Jesus, and then he turned to us. We should be worried about that. And then, Lance, I love what you said in the end of your sermon, and kind of like you were just saying too, but really we have no hope. I mean, there's no way we could defeat Satan other than Jesus. Like, we don't defeat Satan. We can't beat this. But it's like it says, it's only through Jesus and clinging to what he has done, and by his blood and by our testimony and clinging to him.
Right.
And so, man, I'm thankful more and more for Jesus because of that, because without it, it's not even close. So anyway.
Right. Really, when you read chapter 12 here, and, we talked about it in different terms. Maybe we introduced it on Sunday, like the Christmas story. And yeah, I mean, Jesus is born. He enters the picture because what we're reading in chapter 12 is the conflict between Jesus and the enemy, Jesus and the dragon, Jesus and Satan. And we mentioned like verse, where he sweeps the stars out of the sky. Is that verse 3?
4.
4, yeah. And, some people go back before creation, and that's what's going on there. And you get, I'm not sure if that's true, right? I don't think probably that's what's happening in chapter 12, but what we are seeing is this conflict between Jesus and Satan that, has gone on throughout creation. One of the things we maybe underestimate Satan, and one of the reasons I think that's true is because we don't get much of a backstory. When you think about even studying the fall, the being cast from heaven is one of the questions. What does that mean? Well, you do a deep dive into Scripture and Satan being cast from heaven, you really get 2 Peter. Jude 6, maybe you can find that in Revelation 12 here, but that's kind of it. There are like these 3 verses that talk about, if God didn't spare the angels when they sinned, and that's kind of the whole backstory we get in this, how Satan came to be, right? He's a created being. He's an angel. Lots of people say he's an archangel like Michael, kind of this superior station, superior rank of angel, whatever that means. And then he's, he's cast from heaven. He sins, he's cast from heaven. We find him in Genesis 3, right? That's there he is. So he's been cast from heaven at some point. Then in books like Job, you read about there's this interaction. Right. He seems to have access to heaven. This is kind of weird.
Wait a minute, yeah.
Talking to him. Well, sure, you take care of Job. He's got everything he needs. And maybe was it? Maybe in Ezekiel, he's standing at the right shoulder accusing, and so you get again, this vision of heaven. There's this access to heaven. And so lots of people say in chapter 12, we're seeing the sort of final exit from heaven, where he's finally barred, locked out. And I'm not smart enough to know, but maybe that's what, in any event, we're seeing that there is a final, absolute, crushing blow dealt to Satan, and it's Jesus on the cross, right? It's his victory over death on that third day, and now we can overcome him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. So many things to think about, and I'm just this very last verse in chapter 12, just that last line, and he stood on the sand of the sea. Okay, so if we're referring to the dragon right here, and there's some textual things where maybe it's John saying, "And I stood on the sand of the sea," and then look, and then chapter 13:1 has him saying, "And I saw the beast rising out of the sea." But if we're talking about the dragon here, and he's standing on the sand of the sea, just a few chapters ago, we had this angel, this big, mighty angel, and he stands on the land and the sea. And why does he stand on the land and the sea? It's to demonstrate dominion, authority over all of creation. And that's just somebody standing in the stead of Jesus or God, right? That's just an angel standing in his stead. And here Satan is on the sand of the sea. So not quite, that's what I get, right? It's not quite the same.
Yeah.
But really, the next few chapters in Revelation, we're going to read about this sort of unholy trinity, where Satan just disguises himself, not uses these instruments, and claiming to be light when it's really darkness. That he just lies and says, "Pay attention to this. Look at this. This is what I can do for you." And here it's sort of the same thing. If you think about, just in the Gospels, Jesus just walks out across the water. Well, here's Satan. Not quite doing that, right? He's standing on the sand of the sea, and he's not quite the angel representing God any longer. He's this, he's a liar. You go to John chapter 8, I think it's verse 44. He's been a liar forever. When we meet him, he's lying. When we meet him, he's sinning. When we meet him, he's destroying. To your point, that's what he's about is destruction. And in chapter 12, it shows us Jesus as the destroyer of the destroyer. That he overcomes that destruction. So really some interesting things when you study the enemy, and that we don't have all that much information about him. And we know he prowls around like a roaring lion, that we ought to be aware of him, that we ought to pay attention, that he's worth paying attention to, like you said, that we ought not underestimate him, but we should also know and remember that he's defeated, that his time is short.
Right.
Revelation 12 tells us his time is short, which is another reason we ought to pay attention, right? He's awfully busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, thank you guys so much. Thanks to everyone for joining us this week. Next week, we'll be looking at Revelation 13. We have, the mark of the beast, so we have some more things to dive into for that one. But for now, thank you guys, and we'll see you next week.
Yep. All right.